All right, Josh, welcome to Who Killed the Starter Home podcast. This is so exciting. This is really, you're the first person to come back. So I would say this is a great honor to have you back. But I also,
huge honor.
Yeah. But I think, first of all, it's absolutely amazing to be having these conversations still after doing all this research. But what I'm hoping to do today, which is slightly a little bit different, is try to, having done lots of conversations with absolutely incredible people, try to sort of bring it home and see lessons learned. What can we try to do from the people that I have spoken with and the work that you've been doing? And, I'm thinking of this episode of don't try this at home, right? So we learned all this good stuff and people are telling us, oh yeah, go ahead and do it, but maybe don't try it at home. So, all right. So first of all, tell us a little bit about, we're both in Princeton, New Jersey, which one could see from all of our orange background.
That's right.
And
the brick wall is real, by the way. I get that a lot on my own podcast, and the brick wall is actually an old brick wall facade.
Yeah, I have been to your office and I have touched that real brick wall.
Screen. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. My orange wall is also real, but it's just paint on the wall. Anyway, so let's start with what's going on in Princeton real estate market.
Right. So for, it's obviously good to be back. And for people who don't know, I'm a co-owner of Queenston Realty here in Princeton, and we're a boutique real estate firm, and obviously specializing in Princeton, greater Princeton market. So, I think real estate's never not fascinating, that I will say. The overall national market is in transition. If it's not, an extreme buyer's market. Nationally, it seems to be moving that way. Obviously, Florida is very challenged. The balance of Florida, not all of Florida. Texas has challenges. Nevada has huge challenges. Arizona has huge challenges. So a lot of the same states that sort of got clobbered in the last recession, the real estate recession, are definitely dipping both toes into a market shift now for different reasons, right? Insurance reasons, inventory reasons, not overbuilding, but there's different reasons. And then interestingly, in New Jersey, and I don't have the latest data for August yet, but I should have it soon. In July of 2019 in New Jersey, there were 42,000 homes for sale, standing homes in July. In July of 2025, there were 17,000 and change homes for sale in New Jersey. So while some parts of New Jersey were definitely seeing transition to a softer seller's market, if not a buyer's market or a balanced market, New Jersey remains very supply side constrained. Like there's just not enough housing to go around. If you're on TikTok and you do sort of navigate the real estate space, there are people who are trying to buy a house in New Jersey and going viral because of the frustration that they're having attempting to buy a house. And I mean thousands of comments. I'm only can assume tens of thousands of views. One girl posted, does everybody in New Jersey have $600,000 in cash to buy a house except for me? And so, the housing market is definitely challenging in New Jersey for buyers. It's getting a little bit better. However, it's still supply side constrained, severely constrained. And Princeton being 2 million, 50% of the Princeton market's above 2 million, right? So there's just not a lot of affordable housing to speak of in Princeton.
Right. Well, let's talk about that because we're so supply constrained, and well, you and I have started a company that we were hoping would be addressing this issue, and we're kind of in the middle of it. So let's talk about It's getting there. So
it's getting out.
Right. So Princeton is in a unique position that we, as a town, allow purchase of accessory dwelling units separately from primary dwelling. So you could have one single family lot with a primary dwelling, and you can have a accessory dwelling, which is effectively a smaller house on the same property, and they could be both sold separately. And because of this, actually, Princeton has probably, since the regulations were enacted, 10, if not 15 times more ADUs built than any other town in New Jersey. So
Yep.
on one hand, we're actually succeeding. On the other hand, still not enough. So
No, it's supply in Princeton's pretty rough. Yeah, it's not enough. And, I'll speak to two ends of that conversation, right? So I was talking with a resident of Princeton who I would say, well, I will use the word they used about ADUs, right? Disgusted.
Oh, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, disgusted. Now, shall remain nameless, right? I'm not going to tell you after the episode's over, but disgusted with the concept that somebody could build a house in their backyard, in their neighborhood. And I, intellectually, I get it. It's change, and change is hard in any aspect. But on the same time, I think of what I'll literally say, these poor people, I'm not saying financially poor. I'm saying these poor people, like, it's hard to get a house in Princeton. It's hard to get a house in New Jersey as a consumer. And, I'm not a big believer in what, New York City has tried to do with rent regulations and stuff like that, because people just take their rentals off the market and they don't rent them. Like New York has this incentive where they'll give a landlord $25,000 to renovate an apartment. Not a single landlord is taking it because there's too much encumbrance on the property. And so, you have to let the market work. And what we're seeing is that these units, which are not cheap, by the way, it's not like they're not selling inexpensively. They're about $900,000 for an ADU. They're selling fairly quickly. And it's showing you that people want to live in Princeton. They want to live, this is a New Jersey issue. They want to live in Princeton and New Jersey, and they want to have comparatively affordable housing. So if the average sale price in Princeton is over $2 million, single family house is $1.6 million, and 50% of the market's above $2 million, $900,000 for new construction, and maybe it's in the downtown, it's walk to town, it's comparatively affordable, if that makes sense. So there is a viable market for ADUs in Princeton, and I do agree with you that there needs to be more built, and unfortunately, feelings are going to be hurt, and change is hard, but at the same time, somebody developed the lot you live on, Marina. At some point, zoning was changed so your house could be built. So everybody has been the benefit of a zoning change at some point.
Right.
We used to work, she worked here at Queenston with Marty Stockton. So Marty's family, as Marty liked to say, she's like, yeah, my family's been in the land business since the 1600s or, 1700s, whatever. And they used to own all of it. Eventually got sold off. It eventually got developed. Eventually a builder built a house, hopefully made a profit when they sold it. Hopefully that person made a profit when they sold it, and so on and so on. So anybody listening to this podcast has been the beneficiary, if they live in a home, has been the beneficiary of a zoning change. Period. And they've been the beneficiary of a for-profit building model, market-based model, where they got a house. And, when we sell our house and we make, $400,000 or $300,000 in profit, we think we're Warren Buffett. But had the zoning change not happened, had the builder not laid out capital, had the market not been there to take care of, none of this would have happened. So I think, Princeton, despite, making it a little bit challenging for builders to build ADUs, I think the market's there. I think it's viable. And I think, for long term, it's going to be a great tool for people to stay in Princeton.
Well, let's give specific examples. And I love what you said that was it true that I heard 50% of the market are homes over $2 million?
Yeah.
Right.
So
scary.
Right now, there's, I think, 55 homes for sale in Princeton as of today. September 11th, my birthday.
Hey,
And
happy birthday.
Yay. And yeah, so 50% of the standing inventory in Princeton is above $2 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let's give an example where I've actually been working with multiple developers, and I have one developer who has tried building homes and ADUs, and it was very hard. He, every time everything was held up at permitting level, at approvals level, it's been not easy, even though it's supposed to be as of right. So what he ended up thinking is, well, why would I want to do that? So his business model has shifted after trying it, and he decided and ran the numbers, I assume. So if a lot comes on the market that somebody sold to him, he has two options, right? Option number one, tear down the existing house and build a brand new, beautiful home, maximize the amount of allowable square footage to build on the lot.
Yeah, what it is.
Beautiful McMansion, right? And what he would do is he can walk into the zoning office, and in 10 days, 12 days, he can walk out of there with a zoning permit and be approved to be building this McMansion, right? And then when it comes to the market, they're, these brand new, beautiful homes, $2.2 million, $2.3 million. He put one on the market. There was a bidding war. People were really upset that they didn't get it, right? And he's thinking like, well, easy peasy, let me do that, right? Alternatively, what other developers have been trying to do is they come to a lot and there's an existing home on the property that is, from 60 years ago. It's tired. It had a lot of issues. But what they've been able to do is they're clean it up, remodel it, right? Bring it to contemporary standards, re-insulate, do new siding, give it a, upgrade, uplift, and build an ADU in the back. However, that second person, the amount of, what did you call it, disgust from the neighbors.
Yeah, that was the D word, disgust.
The drama, the amount of times that he had to go to the zoning office back and forth, the amount of complaints that had triggered is unbelievable, right? So if we stop and think about it, if I'm a developer, what is the environment telling me, right? Everybody's like, oh my goodness, the home prices are so expensive. Why are there homes for sale for $2.2 million? Well,
because of the discuss factor.
Right. So
yeah, so we'll talk.
Let's talk about that one.
Right?
So
yeah, so
the two homes that would be sold, just to kind of get your opinion. So the two homes that would be sold, let's say there's a 2-bedroom, technically considered an accessory dwelling unit. They're sharing a driveway, right? They're living on, there's no free gift. Everything, both combined, they have to be the same volume as the other big one. So nobody got any extra credit or weren't allowed to do anything special. They have to share that same volume that the McMansion would have had. But now that there's two of them, combined sales price of them, it's not going to be that far off from that 2.2, 2.3, right? Don't you think? However, instead of having one large home at 2.3, they will have one at, 850 and the other one at what, 1350, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is that?
Yeah. So I don't think people are motivated by altruism.
You don't.
Be clear about that. If we were, as a species, there'd be no homelessness, there'd be no addiction, there'd be no all the negative stuff that just happened in the news cycle, right? So we're not exactly motivated by we're motivated by self-interest. So my response to this person who used the word disgust about an ADU, I said, somebody, when your house was conceived and designed and built, somebody was disgusted with that plan. Maybe it was the Native Americans that were here. Maybe it was the guy that owned the tract of land that was disgusted or she had to sell it. That's just housing it's weird, but it's sort of like that, right? When, where I sit on Nassau Street, there's Markham, which is a Hillier building. It's a 3 or 4 story building, condos. When that was built, somebody was disgusted with it. When they built the townhouses on Sargent Street, again, a Hillier project, somebody was disgusted with it. Now they're contemporary masterpieces. When they were being built, they were ruining I guarantee you, if we could go back in time and talk to the neighbors on Cedar or Sargent or, whatever it was, ruining the neighborhood. How could this happen? There was a mini ADU on Sargent Street that was built, right? And the neighbor fought this is going way back, tooth and nail to get this thing done. It was kind of like a by right zoning. They were told they were going to ruin the neighborhood. And now it's like, people are like, God, I wish I had bought that. Because they're self-interested, because their kids now need houses and they want to downsize and stay in Princeton, or their friends are trying to get in Princeton, but for whatever reason, it's the human condition to push back against change. So I always say to people, when you're living at the beneficiary of somebody's forward thinking of creating a zoning change for your home. And I don't care if it's Markham. I don't care if you're in a single family. I don't care if you're in the western section. I don't care. Something changed so you could have that house that you're in. The end. Somebody built it. Somebody made a profit. The end. If it was a landlord property, they made a profit long enough until they wanted to sell it. The end. And that's the market. And, unfortunately, I think real estate's so personal. We live in it. It's our neighbor. We look at it. How could they do this? Ironically, I live in a townhouse community called Queenston Commons, no relationship to the company. When they built those 70 townhouses, people, I'm sure, were like, this is going to ruin everything about the neighborhood. We call those people NIMBYs, right? And I have those reactions still myself, and I try to check it. But now they're like the most desirable townhouses in Princeton because you can walk to town, whatever. So, and it's just funny how history softens people's views when they meet somebody in it and they go, wow, this is a really nice place to live. Versus, you're going to ruin everything. And then you realize, I didn't ruin anything. I'm not saying that some towns zoning mistakes haven't been made. It does. Of course it happens. We're human beings. But everybody listening to this call, you're the beneficiary of a zoning change. You're the beneficiary of a change that allowed a single family house. The next evolution of housing in a state like New Jersey, where it is built out, it is ADUs and or vertical development, right? Condos. That is that's all that's left to build for the most part, en masse.
Well, interestingly, so going back to your comment about self-interest, and when you said we're motivated as a community or as a society by profits, somebody had to make money building something. One other way to think about it is that in Princeton, in the last round of affordable housing, many, many apartments were approved, and some of them are already completed and people are living in them.
Amazingly so.
Some are under construction. But it was very interesting what happened as a result, right? So we have a Princeton shopping center, which a lot of our local people very familiar with, everybody loved. It has a center courtyard, but it was kind of a failing.
It was the place where businesses went to close. Let's be honest.
It was
businesses didn't survive there because it was, then my understanding, it was a family business. The shopping center enterprise was owned by a family. Hard to, it's a real estate's a hard business. It was bought by a REIT, a pretty big REIT, and they developed it. And again, did rents go up? Yeah, but so did their taxes. But they spent a ton of money on the infrastructure. So, and now they have 2 apartment buildings there, one on the north end, one on the south end, and then another one on the other side of Terhune. And now you can't get a parking space in that place on a Friday night.
Well, but not
restaurants
only
are packed.
that, restaurants are packed. There are no vacancies.
Packed.
And it's such a vibrant place that the courtyard has been kind of the center of the community.
Packed.
And it's a safe place for kids to run around while adults are, having dinner, eating ice cream, having coffee. There are so many activities.
It's become its own ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because of housing.
Yeah.
The end.
Right. So the way
we were looking for,
we were looking for economic development. Housing is economic development right now.
Yeah. And, I remember like towns look at kids coming into the schools like they're toxic. Like, we don't want more kids in the schools. So I've had 3 kids in Princeton. You know how much money we've spent in this town because of those kids? On everything. Clothes, birthdays, cakes, food, parties, gifts. Do you know how much money people with kids spent? Versus, and I'm not knocking like 55 plus. I just turned 54 today. So I'm like a year away from 55 plus. But like, my kids are out of the house. I'm not going to the shop to buy them clothes. Like, they like to thrift. They go to thrifting. Like, does that make sense? So it's like, kids make towns economically vibrant. Without a place to live, there's no kids. So, housing is the key to sustainable, sustainable housing is the key to sustainable growth for a municipality. So, and again, when the hospital was moving to the other side of Plainsboro, it's going to ruin Princeton. It's going to ruin it. It's going to ruin Town will never be the same. People are going to die in the ambulance. Every worst case scenario, like, I'm like, oh, so then you start maybe they're right. Maybe everyone's going to die. Maybe the ambulance never happened. And then when Avalon bought it, Avalon's evil. They play hardball. It's going to look ugly. I don't know. I think it looks better than the hospital. I think it looks pretty nice. And you know what people are doing up and down Witherspoon Street? Walking, go to restaurants, going to shop. Like, it's filled with people. And what the homeowners in Princeton have to realize, Avalon on Witherspoon, Avalon at the shopping center, the Alice at the shopping center, Avalon at Sandit Circle, right? 4 pretty big apartment buildings. They are filled with people who want to buy your house, Marina. So when that apartment building went up, if you were already lucky enough to be a homeowner in this town, which it is, you are fortunate, your equity just went up because that building went up and brought people in to go, wow, this is a nice town. I really want to put down roots here. I want my kids to go to high school. I want a single family. And then you're back, but now they're in that doom loop of, what can I buy? So development or infrastructure development, housing development, everybody that lives in a shelter has been the beneficiary of a zoning change. Full stop, the end. And a for-profit system to deliver that housing. Like, and I'm not sure why once you get in, that system becomes inherent, should stop.
Right. Well,
don't build any more.
I mean, I think that it could be that people are looking, and I guess what the selling point was, oh, well, we're going to allow construction of ADUs and we're going to build these apartments and prices are going to go down. And did the prices go down? Absolutely not.
No.
Right? The prices went up.
No.
So then the question is, okay, well, it's clearly their fault, right? It's clearly the fault of the ADUs that the prices are going up. However, is it really? The fact that they happened concurrently really doesn't mean that there's cause and effect over here. So what was really interesting, that a little while back, I spoke to the gentleman from Portland, Oregon, and they've allowed ADUs maybe over 20 years ago, maybe even more than that. And they have since allowed many, many other things. And they had kind of an ADU peak, and their ADUs are allowed to be sold separately. They now allow multiple dwelling units. They allow small lot subdivisions. They allow so many things. And what is very interesting is they're seeing actually prices come down, right? But they're not seeing
interestingly,
that,
to your point, locally, you know what has come down from a pricing perspective?
Yeah.
Rental prices have softened.
Yes. Interesting.
You know why?
Why?
Because we brought on supply. The end. And we brought on nice supply. If you've not been to the Alice,
Yes,
right?
I have. Mm-hmm.
Can I tell you, anybody who's listening to this call, if you've not been to the Alice, and I'm going to shoot myself in the foot here. I walked in there because the customer sold on Sargent Street, actually, went to the Alice, wanted an elevator, didn't want to deal with stairs anymore, right? Just that time of their life. I walked in there to get them some stuff for their transaction. And I walked in there, I'm like, why the hell doesn't anybody look? I mean, it's expensive, don't get me wrong, but like, it's really nice.
It's like an art gallery and their community spaces. It's incredible.
It's incredible. So, you know, the Alice, the Avalon, they've brought rental prices down in Princeton. So what is that like? That's why, you know, the anti-landlord or the anti-builder or the anti-development, and I get it. Not in my backyard. I don't want that here. I bought this the way it was and I want it to stay the same. I fully understand that. But again, you were the benefit of his own change to get to that spot. And unless you change, things stagnate, and stagnation in the world is bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Avalons and Alice and et cetera, and there's more coming, have brought rental prices down a little bit in Princeton, which is good for the consumer. Like, it's good to have choice. It's good that prices came down, but the only way we did that was to bring on supply. The end.
Right. Well, interestingly, let's follow up on the idea of the bringing the rental prices down. And speaking of ADUs, so I think there at the beginning, when the ADU regulations were passed, the selling point was this is a great way for somebody who lives in Princeton and would like to have income generating unit on their property. You know, they could build an ADU and they can rent it out and effectively supplement their income. In my experience, and people had visions, or, you know, like what everybody imagines is absolutely cute, tiny home in their backyard or something along those lines, and they were going to rent it out for, you know, $4,000 or $5,000 a month, and it was going to be amazing, right? Did that happen?
No.
Yeah. So it very interestingly, even though that was sort of the image, and I partly believe that's why a lot of the quote unquote disgust with the ADUs for sale is happening, is that was the image that people had in their minds, and it does not
Right.
match the reality. But if let's walk
Right.
through this, and you have been contacted, I have been contacted by people who had estimates from contractors to build these tiny homes on their property that were not designed by me, that were not contractors that I work with, but people came all upset and they said, oh, you know, we had this lovely tiny home designed for our backyard, and you know how much the cost estimate was to build it? $500,000. I'm like, I know, right? So if you think about it, let's run the numbers. So if somebody has for real built this little home and it does indeed cost $500,000, why does it cost $500,000? Because before you even get out of the ground, to get all of your approvals, to provide all the utility connections, you're over $100,000 just to even get out of the ground, right?
Right.
So at that point,
let's talk about the approval process so people understand, right?
Mm.
Is housing a right? It's pretty close to a right, you know, but in order for it to be provided, there's got to be a profit in it. Like, I think, you know, some of the worst housing is, for lack of a better description, government-run housing, right? But they're just not good at it. I'm not saying government doesn't play a role in this; they 100% do. So the problem in Princeton, like you said, for a builder, is, wow, I could build two. I could actually maybe make a little bit more profit with two, which they theoretically would. But the town is going to torture me to death. And when the town tortures you to death, that means you bought the parcel, it's sitting empty, You're not doing anything with it. Your money is being held in that parcel. Now you're not making money on your money. And that's what people in business want to do. They want to make money on their money. If everybody here is listening to this and they have an employer and they're in a job, they're employed because that business makes a profit, just unless they're working for a not-for-profit, right? And in that case, the not-for-profit either has to go to the government or private sector for people who make a profit and get their money. Like, that's the deal. Profit's not a negative thing. So, the builder now has money out that they're getting tortured to death by the town. And, a frustration is that people want housing, people want solutions. But when housing gets proposed, like with the new master plan that was proposed, people freak out because it doesn't, I think you said, fit their vision of what it should be or what it was. But nothing's what it was. I mean, we don't use whale oil in lanterns anymore either, right? We don't put asbestos around pipes anymore. We don't, fen's bad. Why? Because we learned that those things are bad. And so from the perspective of housing, I think because you live in it and it's personal, that change is hard. But at the end of the day, one of the biggest things that has to change, and it's probably going to change at a state level before it will at a municipal level, right? The state will have to mandate that housing gets fast-tracked and a municipality only has an X window to deal with a housing application, because the towns will sandpaper builders' skin to death to prevent housing. And they do it because somebody with deep pockets gets upset, or a neighbor with deep pockets gets upset, and they can hire lawyers and they can litigate. Something's got to give. Like, if you want housing prices to come down in New Jersey, other than subject to market swings, and long-term they're going to go out, you need to bring supply online. Or if you just want housing prices to stabilize in New Jersey, you have to bring supply online. The end, full stop. Somebody did it for you. We have to figure out a way to do it for our kids and their kids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the funny part. Once somebody moves in, like, not in my backyard, I'm good. No. Well, somebody changed the law for you, man. So that I think it's going to be changed at the state level, where the state's going to finally say, like, look, you have X amount of days to deal with this, the application, because the towns have no incentive to do it. None.
Well, they do at the moment. They do. However, it's very easy for, technically for a small application, it's a 10-day review process. However, at the end of 10 days, they're like, oh, well, we have a question. Here's a question. Oh, well, now we found another requirement. Right? But it's also understandable if you think about the municipal employees who are hardworking people who are trying to do their job. The environment that they're in is what I would call a complaintocracy, right? Where
100%.
If this person approved something that is not perfect, or didn't cross every T, or God forbid, didn't dot every I, the complaints that they're going to come after them are understandably scary. I completely understand their situation. So I have heard, I don't know if this is ever going to happen to us here, but I have heard that we now have, I think it was in Chile, where they have projects reviewed by technology. Wouldn't that be something interesting? Because
you would think it's coming in a way, right? As long as it's a clean application and it gets scanned, right? AI will help facilitate this. But again, it's up to the municipality to adopt it. And, municipalities that are inherently against change won't adopt it. And, that's when in New Jersey, that, a municipality fights the Mount Laurel Agreement. Well, then the builder sues them, and people are saying, well, the builders are just looking to bully the municipality. No, they just want to build houses. It's what their job is. And it's not necessarily wrong, because everybody's saying that the builder's evil lives in a house that a builder built. The land, like the zoning was, like, when you go back a generation, somebody did that for you. So speeding up the municipal process for these people is I think very mission critical. And if you're building in Princeton and you want to go to West Windsor, well, it's a completely separate set of rules, not even the same. So that's why you see the same builders in a town over and over again, because they get comfortable with the rules and they know how to operate within the municipality guidelines. And I'm fine with that. I think it's smart for a town to have a character and want to sustain it or add on to it or whatever. However, like the building I'm in at 344 Nassau, people were putting signs in their front yard, and this is an actual honest to God story, protesting this building. And I asked them to their face, I said, "You don't know what that sign's for?" And they said, "No," but they live in the neighborhood. No, not really. It was just like, it was a contagion, right? Like it was just a thing. So why deep pockets, fear of change, not in my backyard, whatever. Housing's not historic, by the way. People are historic. Housing, when it gets old, becomes functionally obsolete. People, when they get old, die and they get put in the ground. Yet we preserve housing well past its born-on date because we consider it historic. And I'm not saying that there's not beauty in old homes and all that stuff, but it gets to the point where you're inhibiting the next generation of people from having a home. And that's a problem. So there has to be a balance. And sometimes, like you said, in the complainocracy, balance goes to the people with the deepest checkbooks and the loudest voice.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the loudest voice. And that is expressed in having time to attend meetings and having the availability of resources to follow everything, while people with, who are having 2 jobs, 2 kids, trying to balance everything, they're just like, what is happening to me? Why, like that person on TikTok, why is it that I can't find anywhere to buy anything in New Jersey? So I actually, having been talking to a lot of experts, have been trying to think like, how about this for an idea? Let me run this by you. So what I'm hoping is if we could change kind of our borderline or distinction, what is scary and not scary. So right now in the state of New Jersey, single family home, not scary. Easy to get permits, you walk in, no problem. Anything above single family home, it's as scary as if it's 100-unit apartment building and, 3-family building, same level of scary, right? So what does that do? That allows only the people who are building the 100-unit and up, the big corporations who have the lawyers, the expertise, the time to work on projects. And what we've just killed is our innovative small players who could have been trying different small things that could have worked. It could have been a 3-unit building, a 4-unit building.
100%. And there's a building that you and I talked about, let's keep it anonymous because we're still contemplating it, where, it's a mixed use building. There's some commercial aspects to it, but there's residential aspects to it. The biggest hang up for us in going after that parcel ourselves was dealing with the town. Full stop. So what does that mean? It means that a building sitting vacant. It means that there's no vibrancy in that corridor. And the other part of it is we could develop the back of it for residential. It means 3 to 4 to 6 housing units are not being built, literally because of professional people like you and I don't mean professional like better than, like people in the space looking at it and going, is the juice worth the squeeze? Having to deal with the town of Princeton. Hard to answer. And again, it's an eclectic project. It's not a straightforward project, but if we feel this way, what does John and Sally homeowner that wants to build an ADU feel? It's discouraging. And that's why I hope on some level that the state gets its act together. And unfortunately, much like the Mount Laurel's agreement says, look, towns, you don't have 3 years to bring a house online. This is it. And, they mandate it. And then if not, then if the town doesn't get their act together, there's a financial repercussion to the town. So I don't see another way to do it. And, I'm not saying towns are wrong or inherently evil. It's just how housing is a problem. You can go on TikTok and you can search with something like the username is something Scorpio, New Jersey, South Jersey, whatever. Go on TikTok and look this girl up. Viral. Just talking about her frustration trying to buy a home. Viral. Maybe she'll become an influencer, make money that way. She can buy a house. But like, my God, man, it's a big deal. And now it's popping up everywhere. So, people want a place to live. They want, a safe place to live, obviously, and all that good stuff. And it's not unique to Princeton, unfortunately, but Princeton has a solution, and ADU is part of it. Allowing more condo development is part of it. But again, ask any builder who's willing to put out the capital. They go, I'll just build a McMansion.
Yeah, it's so much easier. And
then
yeah, so
and then the neighbors go, why did they just build a McMansion? Why do they have to build a house that big? Because you freaking complained when they went to do the ADU.
Right. Well, I think it all comes down to, if you make it easy to do the right thing, people will do the right thing.
Yeah, exactly right.
Right.
And right now,
if you make
easy's like on the other side of that brick wall and you don't have a sledgehammer to get through it.
Right. But if you make it easy to build a McMansion, well, guess what? People are going to build a McMansion.
To build a mansion.
Right. But if we were able, for example, City of Berkeley just recently passed, it hasn't gone into effect, but what they have allowed, every single lot in their main kind of central space, not in the hills where the fire danger is, but in the main area of town, is allowed to build 8 residential units with 8 ADUs, no need to go to any boards or anything. Just shifted that border from what is scary to not scary, from a house and ADU to effectively 16 residential units for a property. I am dying to find out what's going to happen. I am sure there are going to be lots of kinks. But what the other thing is, what I'm thinking, okay, somebody's going to fail at this. Clearly, right? There are going to be 100%. Some really ugly buildings, and there are going to be some seriously awkward situations. But they're building codes to protect people from fire danger, so it's not a life safety issue. It's aesthetically going to be something's ugly going to come up. But I'm thinking like, okay, well, the worst case scenario, they're going to be so ugly, they're going to have to charge smaller rent, or they won't be able to sell them for so much. Well, naturally occurring affordable housing.
Yeah. So, it's funny, look, on Nassau Street, there's some seriously ugly buildings that have been around for, a minute. And, but it's like the devil, it's always been there. Well, the asbestos was wrapped around your pipe when you bought your house, but they told you not to touch it because it's bad. It doesn't mean that it's good product or it's good commercial or residential. It just means like that's what got built, and I do agree with you on some of the aesthetics that get picked. I like modern. A lot of people like traditional colonial. So, there'll be an inherent conflict there, right? So that's the aesthetic, and it has to look good, it has to be functional, it has to be safe, it has from a use perspective. But yeah, I did read that article. I will tell you, I was a little bit shocked because California is, ironically, despite its liberal reputation, one of the NIMBYest states in the nation. Really tough, really tough. So it's like, why do you build a 10,000 square foot mansion? Because I can. I couldn't build six houses. The builder should just say, because you made me, because you made me.
Right, because that was the easy thing to do. And
that was the easy thing to do.
That if people think, well, it should be easy to do the right thing, this is easy, therefore that's what you want me to be doing, right?
Yeah. And, I'll say locally too, there's a builder who, I've known for 20 years, Roman Barsky, right? So when Roman came to town, he would take a house, he'd buy it, knock it down, and build 2 houses. And my God, you thought he was committing an atrocious sin by literally knocking down a dump, the Cape Cod with low ceilings and shit, bad, an old kitchen and bathrooms that were from 1937 or 1947 or 1950 when it was built. And he knocked that house down and he built 2 functional houses, colonials. Maybe not like the fanciest siding or whatever, but you know what people are doing in those 2 houses that he built in place of 1? Living in it, perfectly happy. And you look back, I don't know how many houses he's built in Princeton, but like, thank God he did it. Like, it'd be a lot worse had he not. So the guy who was vilified reputationally for knocking houses down and building 2, was he? Was he doing something bad? You know, did he make a profit? I hope so. And he also filled a public good while he did it, you know. But I remember at the time, you know, there was a seller who said, "Oh, I don't want to sell to a builder, and I'm not selling to a builder, and da 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 da." And I said, "Look, they rate an offer. I'm going to bring you the offer. That's the law. Don't even bring it." I said, "Well, I have to." So we did. Brought her the offer from a builder, cash above everybody else. You know who she sold her house to? The builder. So it's like, you know, people are funny. You know, this is a lady who was like, "I'll never sell it." She got that cash and bam, she's gone. So, you know, thank God Roman built the houses he did. Thank God he was allowed to subdivide those lots because they were conforming lots, because that's what the law allowed. So, you know, you have 20, 30 extra houses in Princeton that people can live in today in an environment where there's just not enough housing. So it's funny, when he was vilified for doing it, now you're looking back, you're like, "Oof, good on you."
Yeah, well,
You know?
interestingly, you should bring that up because we recently had a case of a different builder who submitted an application to subdivide a property and create 2 lots that would be very similar to the lots next to it because it happened to be a really large lot. And it took him a while and he got approvals. And then there were so many requirements. He had to have this engineering done and that. And they worked really hard and they missed the deadline. They submitted everything, but it wasn't quite enough time to review their application, or, you know, they were really, really close. And I couldn't believe it. Their application was revoked. So there was a person who was trying to build, instead of 1 big giant house, he wanted to build 2 more average sized homes, even had approvals. And then that was removed. And I am not 100% sure how to classify that one. That one is, and I am sure there were very
I would say, I
valid
would use the word,
rules that were followed.
I would use the word egregious, right? Yeah. Because here's the situation with the house that they bought and the builder bought. It was probably functionally obsolete, meaning its time had come and gone. Pro athletes retire for that reason, you know? Pilots retire for that reason. And they just, their time comes and goes. Same thing for housing. So they buy this functionally obsolete house, which I don't want to say it was derelict, but I think I know the one you're talking about. It was like, it wasn't that great. Would have needed a lot of money just to, you know, fix it up to today's standard. And now they're going to build 2 houses, which is a public good. It really is a public good. And they get tortured to death. They get tortured to death to do it. So it's like the builder's like, why would I do that? It just cost me time and money. And I don't know if the outcome's the same. So I'll build a McMansion and sell it. And then people, "Oh my God, they're only building McMansion. They're knocking houses down." Well, that's because you complained and you said you don't want you don't want 2 houses on that lot. 2 normal, you know, comparatively normal houses.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here we are complaining, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, you know, you know, being in the real estate space, you know, I had a buyer consultation with a buyer this morning, and they have a budget. They want X house, and they'll get it. Like, they have a good budget. It's not like that. But, you know, we had a conversation with a buyer last week, and they wanted to be in a certain town with a certain budget for a certain style of house. And I show them that this is everything that is transacted in the last like 180 days. What you're looking for literally has not come to the market in 6 months. I'm not saying it won't. I'm not saying anything's impossible. So we shifted. Now they're looking in a different town, you know, just because and they weren't looking for anything fancy, by the way. This is, kind of a starter home, but the frustration is that I'm in, nobody else can come in. And again, like you are seeing a lot. And I think part of the frustration for people is like, if you drive to West Windsor, all of a sudden there's a lot of development. Well, it's not all of a sudden. That's been in the works for like 20 years. This is, like somebody died of a heart attack. It was all of a sudden. No, it wasn't. They didn't take care of themselves for 30 years. Like it was the decision to not be healthy 30 years ago was the problem today. That development all around the train station, which is where you want to develop, that's been in the works since I moved to Princeton 20 years ago. Been trying to develop all those parcels, and now they're finally doing it. And again, is it aesthetically pleasing? Nah, I don't think so. But it's housing, and it's providing a solution for people to get housing in a great school district and all that other stuff. And here's the other thing too, right? A lot of the townhouses sold over there, and then, people are looking to resell them, right? Some of the new construction, and prices, because there's so much supply coming behind it. So if the new construction sold at $850, people bought them as investment to flip it, thinking the appreciation would carry it. They're not selling at $850, right? So it's like, how do you stabilize prices? Bring on supply. The end. Full stop.
Right. Right. Well, I guess we've come full circle. Hopefully, we're not going to be complaining anymore. But I would.
It's not complaining. I just, I think people lose sense of their own history, and I'll leave it with, kind of where we started. Anybody who owns a home or anybody who lives in an apartment is the beneficiary of a zoning law change. Something changed for that house to be built. So we'll say Marty Stockton's ancestors sold a parcel of land, and the rules were changed, and it started to be developed, right? And that evolution changed, and Queenston Commons was built, and Le Parc was built in West Windsor, and Toll Brothers built a community in West Windsor, and Roman built 20 houses, and like things do continue to change. It's do you fight it and put your feet in the ground, or do you embrace it and say, okay, how can we do this collaboratively? How can we do this in an aesthetically pleasing fashion, which I understand is challenging depending on your taste, but how can we do this expeditiously? And that's where I would leave it is, how can this be done more expeditiously for the ultimate end user, which is our children, right? I'm at the age where it's like, I look at my kids and go, okay, we got to think ahead for this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what my proposal would be is move the distinction between scary and not scary up above from the single family home. That if you could allow things that are, 3 units, 4 units, 5 units, hopefully 10 units to be done faster, expedited approvals, not expedited, but just normal, reasonable, predictable approvals. And yes, leave the scary, concentrated, very complicated approved processes for things that are really big and indeed have an impact. Then we would have that speed. And then after seeing, 3 really projects go through, we're like, okay, well, this is clearly working. This is not working. But without trying, just sitting there being scared, we're never going to find out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And, you harken back to, Avalon on Witherspoon Street. It was going to ruin it was going to ruin everything. There was meetings as to why it shouldn't happen.
Oh, yeah. There were people with meters.
Now it's kind of like
monitoring acoustical construction noise, right?
Yeah. There was meeting after meeting as to why this should not happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what it is now?
A place where people live. Yeah.
It's normal.
That's where your
it's nice in
friends
there. It's
live.
fun. Like you sit in the lobby, people are hanging out in the lobby. They're nice people. Like it's normal. So, part of it is we, myself included, we have to get over ourselves a little bit and, just think how can we be collaborative versus, the general climate of confrontational.
Right. Well, but I think what we're ending up saying is let's have more neighbors.
Let's have more neighbors. 100%.
All right. Thanks, Josh. This is great fun.
Marina, thank you as always. I'll talk to you later.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.